Well, hello, Facebook friends. This is Rene Jensen. We know that because we're friends, but I'm very glad oops, to welcome you to the repeat of my session on contemplative prayer. I do want to start by saying that I'm not an expert. I am an inexpert, erratic practitioner. So, what I'm going to be talking about is things that I have learned that work for me by adapting some of the classic practices of contemplative prayer. So, don't imagine that I am in any way an expert. Just know that I am someone who strives to do the best I can. And I want to assure you that, inexpert as you may be, I hope you find this a blessing. This is a time where, of course, we are all extraordinarily anxious. Our anxiety level may go up and it may go down, but my hunch is it is always there. I keep comparing it to like a low hum that's in the back of our brains, and sometimes it ratchets up and sometimes it goes away to where we don't notice it as much, but it's always there. And I think that kind of anxiety wears on our spirits and our souls and our hearts and our bodies. So, a practice of centering prayer, contemplative prayer, meditative prayer, I think can be one way to help deal with that inner hum that is debilitating for all of us. And we know from science that meditation, contemplation has genuine physiological benefits. Our brain waves slow down, which is good for us. Instead of having that crazy, crazy brain going all the time, our brain waves slow down. It literally nourishes our body and helps to reduce our stress and our anxiety. It increases our mindfulness and ability to live in the moment, which is always so hard for me. And I think it's hard for many of us. And now, especially when we're always wondering what's going to happen tomorrow, what's the next bad news going to be, what's going to happen when all of this is over. So I think that this is a way to help us to live into the moment. And it also is supposed to improve cognition, which I don't know how your brain is working these days, but my brain is so scattered and so unfocused that it's like I have suddenly developed a major case of ADD. So hopefully this will also help us to center and to focus. What I'm going to be talking about is sort of a version of what is known as centering prayer, which is the classic Christian contemplative prayer. But it's not exactly the way the great giants of centering prayer teach it. Again, this is the way I have found works for me. I discovered this form of prayer a number of years ago when I read a book by a woman named Joyce Rupp, who's a wonderful, gentle, spiritual guide for me and has been that for many years through her books. It was a book called The Cup of Life, and it had in there, she taught the practice of what she called breath prayers, which is slow, deep breathing by repeating a phrase. And I started doing that. This was a part of a Lenten study that we were doing. And I started doing it, and it was revolutionary for me. And so that has been the practice of prayer that has been most moving and helpful and sustaining for me over many, many years. Many times when we've been taught prayer, it's been in a sort of transactional way that, and this is not necessarily in the church, it's just sort of out there, I think, in the world, that prayer is a way that we say to God, God, if you do this for me, then I'll be a better person, or I'll up my pledge to my church, or I'll be more helpful to my neighbors, or I won't snap at my children as much. I mean, I don't know, but a lot of times it's just a very, very transactional way of understanding prayer. I tell this little joke because I think it's kind of the classic transactional way of understanding prayer, which is there was a little boy that desperately wanted a bicycle. And so he prayed for a week. Oh God, please, please, please give me a bicycle. And I promise that I will be a good boy. I will be a good boy if you could just give me a bicycle. Well, a week goes by and there's no bicycle. So he ups the stakes and says, please, 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 God, if you can just give me a bicycle, I promise that I will be a good boy and I will do all of my chores without complaining or even being asked. And another week goes by and nothing. And he tries again. Dear God, if you just please give me my bicycle, I will be a good boy and I will do all my chores and I will do all my homework and all my school assignments and I'll be an A student from now on. Well, no bicycle appears. So he thinks about this and then he gets out his piggy bank and he breaks the piggy bank open, counts up all his money and gets it into his pockets, into a bag, and carries it down to the local religious store. And he goes into the religious store and he buys a small statue of Virgin Mary, brings it home, wraps it up in a towel, and puts it up in the way back top shelf of his closet. And then he sits down and writes a letter. Dear Jesus, if you ever want to see your mother again. And I love that prayer because I do think it's this perfect encapsulation of how we understand prayer as a transaction between us and God. It's kind of quid pro quo. And I don't think that I was ever deeply guilty of transactional prayer, but I did subscribe to what I call the bossy kind of prayer, which is probably more congenial for my personality, which meant my prayer life mainly consisted of telling God how to run the world. God, fix this thing, fix this problem, heal this person, take care of this mess that I seem to have gotten myself in, or at least tell me what the solution is and I'll try and get myself out of it. It was essentially what I call trying to get on God's to-do list. And it wasn't very satisfactory overall for me, and it wasn't, I'm sure, very satisfactory for God to hear every day or two from me about my opinions on how God should be running the world. When I discovered this breath prayer, this kind of meditative prayer, it was revolutionary for me because I was released of the burden of telling God how to fix everything. And for me, contemplative prayer is just sitting in the presence of God and letting God come into my heart and life in a much deeper way, a much more meaningful way, so that I made room just to be with God and for God to be with me. So contemplative or meditative prayer is about getting in touch with the God, not so much the God who's up there. I talk with my hands, and it's hard to do it on this Facebook Live, but not so much with the God who's up there, out there, someplace else, but the God who dwells within us. Genesis chapter 1, the very first verse tells us, the very first chapter tells us that we are created in the image of God. Later on, the Apostle Paul talks about the Spirit of God that dwells within us. So I think it is that image of God in whose image we are created and who dwells within us. That is the God that we connect with through meditative or contemplative prayer. And it's appropriate that Joyce Rupp calls these breath prayers because in both Hebrew and Greek, the word for spirit is the same as the word for breath. So it's this breathing in and breathing out that connects us with this inner guide, this inner divine space within us. So how to do it? A few suggestions about how-tos that I think generally, some of them are generally known and some of them are simply how I do it. I think the one requirement is you need to find a quiet place. Some folks I know are living with noisy children at home, and finding a quiet place may be more difficult, but it's almost impossible to enter into a place of meditation and contemplation without, unless we separate ourselves from external noises and distractions. I would say that, so find that place. And I'm lucky, I live alone and with only one other person. So I live alone with, I don't live alone, but I live with just one other person. And that means that this is not a very noisy household. But if you live in a noisier household, just do the best you can. So find a place where you won't be disturbed. I think it is helpful for me if I do it in the same place every time. It's like my body knows, my body memory knows this is what we're here for. We are here to, I'm here to enter into a time of quiet, to sit in the presence of God. So I have my little chair back here. This is my home office, and that's my chair, and that's where I go. And it's very comfy, but at the same time, it lets me maintain posture. I would say about the noise, if you do live in a noisy house, I like it just to be silent, but you may certainly put on some contemplative music that helps drown out the external noises. So a quiet place, wherever you can carve that out in your home. The posture, I think, is very important. You want to sit up straight because we need to be able to breathe. And that happens best when we are sitting up straight, not with our legs crossed and not slumped. And we may be in our favorite recliner, but, don't recline back. So we need to have a good place where we can sit up straight. I will just say, kind of parenthetically, if you are a practitioner of yoga, I have in the past done some very meaningful meditative prayer in the corpse pose from yoga that you end your practice with in yoga. I have found confessionally, as I've gotten a little bit older, my older back doesn't conform to that so well, but if you're a practitioner of yoga, you might want to consider doing it then. Otherwise, sit in a chair, sit up straight, and put both feet on the floor. You want to be literally grounded here, so don't have your feet, your legs crossed or so on. You want to have both feet on the floor. And then what do you do with your hands? Clasp them in your lap in whatever way works for you. I find for me the most effective way is often to have them just on my thighs with the palms up. And for me, just that physical act of putting my palms up sort of signals a receptivity. And so that's very important. That works well for me. But today, I want us to put our hand over our diaphragm, because I think in meditation, contemplation, the breath is everything. So we want to breathe from our diaphragm. So put our hands over our diaphragm and then just take a deep breath in. And release. And breathe in if you can through your nose. We're getting to be allergy season. It may be more difficult, but breathe in. And you should feel that diaphragm expand. And what you want is that long, slow breathing from your diaphragm. A lot of our tension is because we just don't breathe. I say often, I think our bodies, 9/10 of the time, maybe more, are oxygen deprived. So we need to breathe. So that's where we start, and really that's where we end with that deep, slow breathing. When I first tried to meditate, when I was in seminary, I thought, well, I'm going to be a minister and I probably should learn how to meditate. And there weren't really, it was before the internet, and I was in your typical Protestant seminary that didn't teach very much about spiritual practices. So all I knew about meditation was I should empty my mind. So I tried to empty my mind, and as soon as I emptied my mind, it would be filled with all kinds of thoughts like, do I need to go to the grocery store? And since this was in seminary, oh my goodness, I need to schedule an appointment with this professor so I can talk with him about that paper that I have due, or a concern about my work. And, so just in the Buddhists who have been at this meditation thing for a lot longer than almost anyone else talk about that as the monkey mind. And we all have that monkey mind. So that was why, for me, the discovery of breath prayer was so revelatory. And so that as we make these deep, slow breaths, just add a phrase, whatever phrase you want. I have some kind of go-to phrases. And for me, the one that I've been going to the most often over these past couple of weeks is do not be anxious. So that just on the in-breath, do not be anxious. Do not be anxious. And this is where I do this differently than the typical centering prayer where you have a certain word that you always repeat. I just repeat a phrase that fits my current move. So, do not be anxious is a very common word these days. When I'm trying to make more room for God, another one is to say more of you, less of me. So it's more of you, less of me. I think you probably would want to, when doing the breath prayer, not only to breathe slowly and deeply, but pause at the top. For a few seconds as you keep breathing. A classic prayer from the various early days of Christianity is one that's based on Scripture, and that's Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy upon me. It makes you take longer breaths because it's Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me. Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy upon me. So that is another way of just repeating this prayer. Sometimes all we need is a word. A word that I have been repeating a lot these last few weeks is just peace. 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 Anne Lamott has this great little book on prayer where she talks about the 3 essential prayers, or help, thanks, and wow. And I don't think I've ever used wow as a part of breath prayers, but centering prayer. But I certainly often use help, just help me, or thank you. When I'm struggling with a decision, sometimes it's guide me. So I would encourage you to discover whatever word or phrase speaks to your state of mind at that moment. And then take those long, deep, quiet breaths and repeat that. Now, I would like to be able to tell you that as we add these words to our time of meditation, that it completely crowds out the monkey mind. But I'm sorry to tell you, it does not crowd out the monkey mind. So these are the ways that I have learned to work with my monkey mind and those intrusive thoughts that come in. I did read a long time ago that one suggestion was to use visualization. And so I tried that. I think the suggestion was to imagine a box and you could just put these intrusive thoughts in the box so you could come back to them later. But visualization didn't work for me because I don't think I'm very good at visualizing. And so I would spend all my time thinking, well, what color should the box be and what shape should it be and does it have a lock on it? So I don't do visualization. But if you have a great visual, if you're a very visual person, that might work very well for you. What I have found just works best for me, a lot of times the intrusive thoughts that come in are things I need to do, particularly about work or church. And so I just say, not now. Not now. Not now. Which for me acknowledges that this is a reality that I need to take care of, but it also reassures that anxious part of my mind that I will get to it, just not now. And so I repeat those words, not now, and then I return to it, and then my mind knows that I'm going to get to it. It's not that I have completely forgotten. So not now works for me. Sometimes I will turn that intrusive thought into a prayer. So earlier today, when I was having my practice for today, I suddenly thought of something that I wanted to do with my grandchildren. And so I just turned it into a prayer, and I spent in my breath thanking God for my grandchildren by name. So thank you for their name. And that again seemed to help. So if I'm thinking about, work stuff, I give thanks for the wonderful people of St. Andrew. Someone is commenting that Ruth Cyrus, who is this wonderful spiritual saint at St. Andrew, talked about seeing those things floating down on a river. For me, I don't visualize well, but that would be a wonderful visual to have. So if I'm thinking about what I should have for dinner, I just pause and give thanks that I have food. And if it's work, I pause and give thanks for St. Andrew. So I try and just offer thank you for that particular thought if it feels like that's the right thing to do. And then once you feel like you've sort of dealt with that with some deep breathing, then you return to your word or phrase that you had in the beginning of your practice. Intercessions. I felt like when I started doing breath prayers, I sort of let go of the practice of intercessory prayer, and I wasn't happy about that because I think I value intercessory prayer very much. And so then I would just do separate intercessions. But again, I was kind of back like, Jane Doe's going to have surgery tomorrow. She's going to have her part of her colon removed. God, please. Yeah. And so I feel like God didn't really need to know all that stuff because God probably already knew all that stuff. So now I incorporate intercessions into my breath prayer, my contemplative prayer. And I usually write out a name or concerns of my concerns before I start and put it there by me, but I don't look at it. Because I try and keep the number down to a level that I can remember. And then I just offer their name. So instead of saying, Jane Doe's having surgery and please be with her and calm her, and I just lift this person up in love and concern to God. So it would be Jane Doe. And I just lift them up in love and prayer to God for over 1 or 2 or 3 breaths, whatever feels right. So I give God those people in love and prayer and concern, and I literally give them to God. And I don't feel a need anymore to tell God what to do with this problem. I believe that God, in God's infinite love, knows best how to do that. So how long should you do it? I First of all, the practice of contemplative or meditative prayer, like anything else, takes practice. So don't assume that unless you're one of those innately mystical people, that you can start off by doing it for 20 or 30 minutes. I think be realistic and shoot for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. You want to be able to do it longer than that because it takes a while to get into that relaxed and meditative state, but don't feel like you need to get there right away. I would suggest, and this varies, but for a lot of people, about 10 minutes seems to be a minimal time where you can kind of get there, get relaxed, and then feel more centered and calm. I would suggest shoot for at least 10 minutes. Classically, centering prayer is suggested about 20 minutes. And I think that is a good goal to shoot for, depending on your time frame. If you don't have 20 minutes, if you have a busy life and kids are home, or you're juggling, trying to figure out how to work at home, or 1,000 other things, if you can't do 20 minutes, shoot for at least 10 minutes. But longer and more allows you to go deeper. So that might be an aspirational goal. Okay, this is a confession. I'm not very happy about this, but this is how I am. I am very time bound. I am always obsessed with time. And so when I sit down to do my meditative prayer, I set a timer. So embarrassing. But I find that particularly when I'm very busy, that I'll say, I want to do this for about 10 minutes. I think I'm going to sit down and do my prayers, and I'll start to worry about how long have I been doing this, and I have other things to do. And so I just set a timer. If I think I want to carve out 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I set the timer. And then that part of my mind that's obsessed with time, it's a good chunk of it because I worry about time. I'm obsessed with it. Ask my husband. Gets it calms down, and I can just set the timer and I go. And sometimes the timer goes off, and I'm going to go longer. But for me, it relieves this constant worry about, am I doing it long enough, or have I done it too long? And because then if I worry I'm doing it too long, all that monkey mind stuff starts up. So don't if you're like me and you're highly anal retentive, I'm blaming it on being a TJ, or maybe a number 1 on the Enneagram. So it's not my best part, but it is one that is absolutely true. I worry about time too much. And you can do this anywhere, not in this deep meditative state, but just any time you're feeling stressed, just to take a few deep breaths, even if all you do is count. Like typically just for deep breathing, it's 4 counts in, 7 counts at the top of the breath as you hold it, and then 8 counts out. I don't think I have enough lung capacity to quite make all those counts. But if all you do is count slowly and take some deep breaths, or just, if you're very stressed, just help or calm or peace, and just can do that for a few minutes, maybe after watching a presidential press conference. Whatever it takes to just calm yourself down. And it doesn't have to be 5 or 10 minutes. It can be 1 or 2 minutes just to calm down. We really just flooding these cells with oxygen makes a lot of difference. Finally, I would encourage you to look for people who really know what know far more than I do about this. Richard Rohr is one of the great spiritual giants of the of right now. Has a YouTube video on it. You might want to look at his. Thomas Keating, who is kind of one of the gurus of centering prayer, has a YouTube video, and you can look at those who really know what they're talking about and learn some more. So if anybody wants to ask a question, I would be glad. Someone is confessing that they also are obsessed with time. So yes, it's okay to set a timer. Anyway, any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you missed the first part, we'll save this Facebook Live video, and this is on my personal Facebook page, but we'll post a link to it off the church Facebook page as well. So thanks for joining. Be at peace. Stay safe. And stay in. And stay calm as much as you can. Thanks. Peace. Blessings. And